Hey guys, welcome back to the Blunt Blowin Mama podcast. I am here and this has been an episode I've been kind of thinking in my head I want it to happen, but me and my guests, we are in different locations and regions in the country. And I was like, well, if it ever happens, it'll probably be virtual. And then alas, we just so happened to both be in LA for 420 weekend, our annual holiday, right? And I just had to slide into the DMs and shoot my shot and be like, hey, you want to come to be on my podcast? And luckily you said yes. So we're going to have a really great conversation about the science of cannabis and in our brains and motherhood and just really deep diving into a lot of the things that folks wonder about this plant that we can only speculate. And now we have a real scientist, y'all, on the podcast. So I'm so excited. So please introduce yourself and let the folks know who you are. You guys, this is going to be a fun, great convo. Mark my word, get your weed ready.
I'm so excited this worked out. I think that for me also, as someone who struggles with social connection, being in person, I take so much from body language and I read a lot of emotion from non-verbal, non-auditory things. Mm-hmm. So when you messaged me, also it aligned because there was something else that was happening. And then it just happened that got moved that morning. Yes. That you messaged me. And a lot of my life has been driven by mysticism and magic. And mm-hmm. I told you earlier, this is a conversation that I never thought that I would have. I never thought that I would want to give my opinion on this subject. And that I also haven't felt like I could. So I guess I'll introduce. I'm Dr. Miyabe Shields. I am a pharmaceutical scientist. I studied the system in the brain that interacts with cannabis, the endocannabinoid system. I did a part of drug discovery. So I am the co-founder of a research nonprofit. We are, to my knowledge, the only one of the only independent research nonprofits in cannabis. There's a few, mm-hmm. and I'm excited.
That's really cool.
I'm very excited for being able to do research outside of both the academic and industrial realm, mm-hmm. but tangentially and with both sides. And at our nonprofit, myself and my co-founder, Dr. Riley Kirk, we're both Ph.D. scientists. We're both biochemists. So we studied the atomic molecular interactions of these drugs mm-hmm. with the things in the body that interact with it. And when I was getting my PhD, I was trying to cure myself and I was trying to develop a new pharmaceutical drug that would treat myself in a way that cannabis helps me. And it was about halfway through my PhD that I realized that wasn't going to happen.
What were you trying to treat?
A whole slew of things. I have had chronic issues my whole life, but my main struggle and the challenge that I struggle with the most is my brain. Mm-hmm. And I've known since I was young, I don't have a ton of childhood memory, but what I do have of it is I've known that I've just loathed everything about my brain because while it gives me the things that people value a lot, and while I am very gifted with a lot of things that have helped me and that I'm grateful for, mm-hmm. those gifts have come with equal challenges to me. Mm-hmm. And I struggle a lot with disability in ways that it's not visible. It's very invisible mm-hmm. at times. And I was trying to cure myself of that and become what everyone else wanted me to be. And a huge component of this is also me just realizing that I can't be someone that I'm not. Mm. And that a piece of what was trying to get cured out of me was identity. A piece of what was trying to get fixed by the pills was just something about myself that actually I needed to embrace and move forward. And that actually then studying the molecular mechanism of cannabis and really understanding all the pieces of the brain and all the pieces of the body and all the different things that we do and don't know, because yes, there is unknown here in cannabis, yes. but there's unknown in everything. Yeah. And I came to the edge of that cliff. When you do your PhD, you're coming to the edge of knowledge of something and you're trying to add something of knowledge to the rest of the world. That's what scientists try to do. Mm-hmm. And I came to the edge of this knowledge of the intersection of my personal experience with a huge number of psychopharmaceuticals, my personal experience with a huge number of drugs, actually. Mm-hmm. And that intersection with understanding the biochemistry of how these molecules interact in our brains. Mm-hmm. And the conclusion that I came to was that there is, for me personally in my life, no safer medicine than cannabis. Mm-hmm. There is nothing that reduces the risk of me, the risk that I would do harm to myself or that I would do harm to those who love me. Mm-hmm. That risk goes down with cannabis. Mm-hmm. And that cannabis functions for me primarily as an anti-anxiety as an antidepressant and as a preventative antipsychotic, and that it also functions as an anti-inflammatory for a huge number of things that flare with inflammation, including all mental health, like including all mental health things, but like GI distress. And I also have chronic joint pain and a lot of injuries, and that those things for me, cannabis really is clearly a medicine that will not be replicated by a synthetic drug in my lifetime, I don't think. And even if it was replicated, and I think that would be really exciting, and I do think that's the future, is to be able to understand it on that level and understand, the beautiful diversity in the living plant, the beautiful diversity in the body, and to get some reproducibility with formulations it's already happening, and that's cool. And I think that is the goal. But even if you were to put that into a pill, I would still prefer to light it up. And I would still prefer to go meet the person who grew the flower. And I would still prefer to see the beautiful hash. And I would still prefer to have a different connection to my medicine. And also that we don't know what positive benefits that has. And so I think that's just like the context that I'm trying to bring with the education that I do personally. And also with our nonprofit. Our nonprofit is about science as advocacy. Our nonprofit is about it. You know, we want to be included in conversations not as addicts. We want to be included in conversations where benefits that we're seeing as a community that all of us know and understand are being valued from a place of how it helps us. In a direct comparison to how we treat the pharmaceuticals and the other molecules that we regularly have in our bodies, all the time.
And that are societally acceptable. What's the name of your nonprofit again?
The Network of Applied Pharmacognosy. And we're going by NAP for short.
Okay.
Because everyone likes nap times. Especially
moms.
Especially you all. You all know. I know what you all are doing during nap times. You're getting your shit done.
We're getting shit done. We're smoking weed.
You're getting creative, productive, and doing a little thing for yourself too, hopefully, right?
Yeah. And going back into, saying how you prefer to actually light up over taking it as a pill. I think that there's something that goes into the ritual of touching the herb itself, of being able to grind it up, of being able, if you're rolling, to roll it up, that paper touching it. It's kind of like if you're thinking about other things in that moment, now you have to focus on like what you're doing. You have to focus on preparing this plant for you to enjoy it, right? And so I think that for me, at least, I call that self-care.
I was gonna say that you're making it for yourself. You're taking a moment to make something for yourself, which I know that for moms and all the moms that I know in my life, like that's hard. That's hard to do something for yourself.
It's grounding in a sense, because you're touching this like flower, and you're preparing something that's just for you, and it's a special treat, and you have this moment of quiet time, and it's ritual, it's self-care, it's self-ritual, and it's the highest form of self-love, I think.
And it's a different medicine. I would love to have the dosing. I would love to have the dose accuracy, precision, the discretion, and the duration of action of edibles. I like, those are all positives of edibles. Absolutely. Edibles dissociate me from my body a little bit. Ever since I took the psychopharmaceuticals, edibles haven't felt the same to me as they felt before. And I think I've found ways to balance certain effects out with the rare. And also I've tried with a few different formulations. A lot of different edibles are made now with a different way of putting it in. It used to just be hash. Like hash oil, or it would be ABV. Typically, those were like the two most common ways that people would make edibles, or like a simple butter, I guess. But usually it was hash. At least earlier. And so
now we got the nanotech.
Which I do love, and it's I think it's very cool and very different. But ever since taking the psychopharmaceuticals, edibles, that was, and it could be, to be totally honest, that I had a really negative experience as well, and that became associative, right?
Really? Do you think that's possible? Because I so not to cut you off, but I just had a thought.
I think it's possible.
I've had a thought. Like, there's people that I've met, and they'll tell me, like, no matter what dose edible I take, no matter what brand, no matter like what's in that edible, I don't feel anything. It doesn't impact me. I don't feel high. I don't feel anything. Why are some people able to get, high, if you will, from edibles, and like some people feel nothing? They can eat 10,000 milligrams and not feel a thing.
They're crushing like dispensary regulated gram edibles. Like it's not like,
it's not in the store what they need.
Well, so what this is, I can't believe you bring up this question, because this question is actually part of the story of how Dr. Riley Kirk and I became friends. And
really?
how we actually the question that we asked, can you feel edibles or not?
Yeah.
We both had made videos on edibles.
Okay.
And the comments were insane. I mean, the comments are like, why can't I feel them? And it was a huge amount
people
of
think like, why can't I? Is it bad weed? Is it like, you know?
And then the other side. The other side is people are saying, you're not decarbing right. You're not this, you're not that. And it's like, no, this is too many people for that.
Or it's just something wrong with you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or there's something wrong. Yeah. But both of those opinions, both of those sides were so there were so many of them.
Yeah.
And we were like, this is crazy. So we met on TikTok because we both were making education content.
Nice.
We were both making education content about each other's PhDs, which I think is weird
yes.
and interesting. And then we meet up and we were like, hey, did you notice that thing about edibles, you know?
Yeah.
And that year was right after COVID. Mm-hmm. And so the International Cannabinoid Research Symposium Society, every year there's a big international conference mm-hmm. on all the research in cannabis. And that year it was hybrid. Oh. And so I was able to go mm-hmm. because I could just, go on virtually. Mm-hmm. And I went to this subcommittee group that was specific to phytocannabinoids and cannabis, the plant, a mm-hmm. subcommittee research group of people who research the plant. And mm-hmm. I was really excited. Mm-hmm. But one thing that I asked them, I just was like, hey, like myself and another scientist, actually Riley's like, I was like, we have noticed something. Like, does anyone know, mm-hmm. does anyone know of this phenomenon mm-hmm. that a good number of people don't feel edibles?
Yeah.
And everyone in the science discussion room was like, I've never heard of that. And then meanwhile, a medical doctor raises his hand from Connecticut. And I think his name was Dr. Bibacow, but I'm not, it might be something similar. Mm-hmm. But he said, hey, I'm a medical professional. I'm not a scientist. I'm attending this year just to take in some knowledge. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm here at the conference. He's like, but I feel compelled to like just give my 2 cents because mm-hmm. this is my opinion as a medical professional that's writing prescriptions in Connecticut over the past few years. Mm-hmm. I would say that it's about 20%. It's about 15 to 20%. He was like, I think 15 to 20% of my population can't feel edibles, right? So then Riley and I are like, this is wild,
Interesting.
And because that's a big percentage of people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cannabis users out there.
Yeah,
like we're a big population.
I believe that take. I believe that.
And that was just, so this is just, this is us being like, this is in the community.
Yeah.
So that following, I think it was Monday, Riley was driving back down. I lived between where she was moving places and I happened to live right in between. And she drove down and we met up because we were like, why don't we film a video together and we'll ask everyone. We'll be like, hey, help us. Let's figure this out. And we got over 20,000 respondents in less than 24 hours. And it was about 20%.
Wow.
Well, so we pulled Reddit, LinkedIn, Instagram, and TikTok. And they all were different populations. And yes, there's probably some overlap. And definitely I have to say it because I'm a scientist, like there's a bias here. It's called a selection bias. Yeah. And the people who listen to our information and want to learn about cannabis, we're cannabis consumers.
Yeah.
My argument to that is like, I don't really care about the self-selection bias. That's actually what I want. I am trying to study our community. Riley and I care about, we care about everyone in the cannabis community, but the daily consumers, those of us who are consuming daily, like we are a different population. We are more discriminated against. And we care about the research in our population that hasn't been done.
Yeah.
And so I don't care about that self-selection bias. That's still 20,000 people that answered that question.
It's valid.
Over separate data sets because Redditors aren't really usually on TikTok.
Yeah.
And
that's so interesting. That's a good point. Yeah.
And LinkedIn is its own whole thing.
Yeah.
Now it was between that data set, all of those were between 18 and 21%. That was our range.
Okay.
And then recently with our nonprofit, we launched the most inclusive and like largest. And to our known thing, we're the only scientific study to look at daily consumers from a neutral to positive perspective. And we found that the results were overwhelming. Over 4,591 people in the first month signed up for this study.
Wow.
And 16% of people can't feel edibles.
Shut up.
And that is well within the lines of what we found through social media. So first of all, it validates social media as a data collection.
Yeah.
It does validate because look at how many data sets that we found now that are all kind of saying the same thing.
Yeah.
That's a validation. They're validating one another.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's an overlap in our populations of all of these data sets.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't change the fact that people don't feel edibles.
Yeah.
And that we don't have it in the scientific literature that this is
That
like
is
a huge phenomenon that
fascinating.
that needs to be investigated, from whether the enzymes are in our livers, that our livers are processing differently, whether there's microbiology in our bodies that are processing it differently. You know, you've heard like the probiotics, the prebiotics, and that, you know, we actually have more bacteria on our skin and in our small intestine. We have more cells of bacteria than we do our own cells. Like, it's a very much so a living on living thing. We are alive. We're meant to be alive. The earth is alive. We are one living thing. We are part of that living thing. Community is all alive. Like the whole earth, even a rock. You can't tell me that a rock is not alive. And in some ways, I've had conversations with a lot of people about how fire meets most of the primary scientific definitions of life, like consuming energy, reproducing yourself. Like,
I love fire.
It lacks genetic material, but viruses can't reproduce without us. Anyways, that's just like,
I'm like, yeah.
That's what I love about cannabis, and that's what I love about this community and finding it, and that, you know, the edibles thing, we don't know. And it would be great. And it would be great to get actually a call for spot, but it's hard to work with human samples. And so it would be great to work with a group that's already testing a lot of other things, because they already have the ability to deal with blood and to deal with urine. And it's very, very difficult. Like there's all these barriers to entry to science that are there for a reason. There's, you know, there's safety precautions, and they're there for a reason, but they're very high barriers of access to science that makes science very expensive. Like the level of science that I like to do requires millions of dollars in like equipment, and then also just like a constant hazardous waste exposure, like all this ventilation, extra like lots of electricity, -80 freezers, liquid nitrogen on tap. Like you need a lot of stuff to do the levels of research that we need to do here. And so that's part of where it gets complicated, and part of where community and real world information needs to step in as it needs to step in as an equal contributor. We need to be valuing our personal narratives. We need to be valuing and respecting the experience of others who don't experience the same thing as us. And that's just it's a new thing for science.
I'm like, my mind is blown, because that 20% sounds so believable. And honestly, I'm just like, when I first started hearing people tell me that, I was like, you know, well, maybe it's something you're doing wrong. But then I thought to myself, like, you know what, let me just validate what they're saying. Like, if that's your experience, that's your experience, that's your lived experience. And like, there's got to be something to that. So I look forward to any research that you put together in the future for that. I will definitely keep an eye out for that, because I think that that's something that a lot of folks within the community, you know, there's so many studies that get done on cannabis, and I feel like a lot of them are not the things that people in the community want to have studied and want to understand more about the plant itself and how it interacts with the individual body and our endocannabinoid system. Which, speaking of endocannabinoid system, I would love, like, you know, I try to talk about it on the podcast and break it down, but I would love to hear, like, from you as a scientist, like, what are your thoughts on the endocannabinoid system? And do kids have them? I've been saying it, and I'm pretty sure like kids and babies do, but like, we're born with endocannabinoid systems, right? Okay. So please let the folks know a little bit more about the endocannabinoid system.
All right. It's an ancient evolutionary system. And I think that like whether or not anyone is ever exposed to cannabis, anything that is warm-blooded, it is essential for our lives. Any warm-blooded animal, which humans are, we're animals also, like any warm-blooded animal, any mammal is going to need their endocannabinoid system. They're going to need it. And also that if we look back through all of life, it is present in a ton of other life. And it actually, the earliest, what we would call like a cousin, you know, when we talk about evolution, we're talking about like it's a hard thing to conceptualize, because people don't like to feel related to like jellyfish, or it's like you don't feel the same way as a jellyfish as you would a cousin, clearly, right? But that we branched off at some point, right? And jellyfish are much simpler. And the thing of the jellyfish that we have actually is that group was a mobile group of things that had stomachs. So like that's like part of where the stomach evolution started, was in that phase. A stomach was one of the first things we evolved.
Really?
It's the ability to break stuff down, right? So it's like the jellyfish bring the fish up into their little like
And
area where they release the acids to then break stuff down. And like, so Hydra, which is in the same family of jellyfish, they're in the same family. They're also very evolutionarily ancient. I'm talking like, you know, when we talk about when life began and it was just in the ocean, like that's what we're talking about. It was in the ocean only. Back then, they had receptors that are very similar to CB1 receptor. And that we actually they showed that they put the endocannabinoids in the tanks and that it affected the mobility. It affected the way that these hydras were moving around. It's wild. So like this system has been with us in life for a long, long time. And that is actually evidence that in some plants that make, I mean, not just the phytocannabinoids that are in cannabis, but also that chocolate and cacao will contain fatty molecules called ethanolamines that are very similar to anandamide, which is what we make in our brains.
Really?
It's one of the reasons why they think chocolate's an aphrodisiac.
Oh, interesting.
And it's fascinating. Also, I love chocolate as a vector for edibles for that reason, just because I think it's a fun little tidbit and it helps. And so
interesting.
So this is a system in our brains and bodies that's been evolving with life for a very, very long time. Now, why did these systems evolve? They evolved because as life got more complex, like we used to be one cell and it would respond to stress. And then that one cell would be like, oh, I'm stressed. I'm too hot. I'm too this. I'm going to respond to it chemically inside this one cell. Now, then we started to get more and more complicated. There's more and more cells going on. They had to talk to one another. And that's why these systems evolved. They evolved so that we could communicate from our foot to our brain being the thing that's coordinating whether we're breathing or not, our heart muscle cells, our heart cells, our fat cells, our stomach cells, our immune system cells, our blood cells. Now we have so many different types of cells.
Right.
And they need to talk to one another. They need to be able to coordinate responses to stress. Right? Like,
and I thought it was the nervous system's job to do that.
No, it is.
Okay.
Definitely. But they're all cells. The nervous system is made up of cells. So the nervous system is brain cells, it's spinal cells, it's nerve cells. Right. Like, and the nervous system has, your nervous system has to talk to your cardiovascular system, which is different cells. Your nervous system has to talk to your immune system, which is up there too, but it's also all over the place, right? So the ability for these systems and for these cells to talk to one another when they're stressed, to respond so that you don't die. If we don't get too hot, if we get hot, we sweat. Right. So that we don't die of overheating. Right. That process is coordinated by these systems talking to one another. So there's serotonin system, right? There's dopamine. Those are the serotonin system and the dopamine system are the two most commonly known systems. I think GABA might be the next one. Okay. But there's plenty more. There's glutamate, there's like the AMPA and NMDA. There's nicotinic receptors. There's tons of different systems too. And the endocannabinoid system is a very important system that is one of these many, many communication systems. I think it's the most important one. I am incredibly biased. I have spent 14...
I'm here for it. I'm also biased.
Okay, good. I just have to say, I have spent 14 years researching nothing else. I am incredibly biased that I think it's the most important system, but I think it is because it signals in the opposite direction and it exhibits control over the other ones. And the type of control that it exhibits over them is that it tones them down. It inhibits them for the most part. For the most part, it reduces, and that just tracks with what happens in my brain. It's reducing unnecessary activity. It's reducing extra activity that leads to extra inflammation, that leads to extra challenges and things. And so that made when I understood that was the role of what it was, and that it works on your energy metabolism. So that is like your sugar and fat and your metabolic and then your immune system, because inflammation is the beginning of the immune system. So because it's an inflammation regulator. It's a powerful immune system regulator. And then the third thing is brain activity levels, total levels of like, not thoughts, activity, which sometimes that activity is subconscious. Sometimes that activity is in your body. Sometimes the extra brain activity leads to pain in your body. Sometimes the extra brain activity leads to what people would say are psychosomatic things. And then they blame you for having them. And it's like, yeah, okay, this might be caused in my brain, but I am still experiencing it. Right. So like, you know, like And when I realized that that's what this system does, that, that changed my life.
Yeah. So I like to always say that like the endocannabinoid system it's what keeps you at balance. It's what keeps you like middle of the road, and things will spike up and go here and there. But your endocannabinoid system, when taken care of, will keep everything like as balanced as can be. I want to like pull on something that you just said, which is that like the brain and the endocannabinoid system, because so often people will say, if you smoke weed, you're going to be brain dead. You're killing your brain cells. Like you're not going to have good memory recall. If you're a mom who's smoking weed, like you're basically like you have nothing up there in your head. Like you're not going to be able to remember. And I know that like the war on drugs had, the best marketing campaign of all time. And they had that one commercial where here's your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Here's your crack the egg. Here's your brain on drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And so people associate that and think that if you smoke weed.
Some drugs.
Yeah. But not weed. Like people think that, okay, if I smoke weed, like my brain is an egg in a pan and it's frying.
No.
Is that true?
No. Well, I mean, I'm sure we could get there. Some of us seem to be trying, but like no one yet, right?
Yeah.
I mean, no one yet.
Yeah.
Interestingly so, no one yet. The synthetics are another thing. The spiced shit, don't use that.
Yeah.
Like the synthetic stuff, that's another topic and another thing that we're talking about weed. No. And where that comes from is really interesting. Going to the whole, like your brain cells are dying, this, that. Okay. Like, yes. Like our brain cells are dying out here. Let's be honest. From the moment we're born, all we're doing is dying. I mean, like, that's just what life is. That is life. Life is both, regeneration and regrowth and healing, while also the culling and the death and transition. Even things in our life are dying and recoming or and being reborn. All the time, things come in our life. So when people say that about the dead brain cells thing, drinking and blacking out kills your brain cells. Like I took a lot of benzos. I'm sure that killed my brain cells. I almost OD'd on sleeping medication. I'm sure that killed my brain cells. I've had a lot of concussions. I'm positive that killed my brain cells. I eat and have had a horrible diet for like a while in my life. And like, there are all sorts of things that we do all the time that absolutely contribute to our health in ways that we are looking and assessing for net benefit. And so that's what I say about the killing of the brain cells.
Because so why does cannabis get picked on so badly? Like if we're doing all these other things that's literally killing ourselves every day or killing brain cells, but somehow weed is the one that gets like called out.
Honestly, the root of it, again, that I've said, I'll say again, I don't have enough experience or knowledge yet to speak on capitalism or colonialism in a way that is eloquent that I can help other people understand it, because I don't quite understand the effects of it on my life. I understand that they are huge and overreaching.
Yes.
And I do understand that they're the source of it, though. And that is the source of where the stigma of cannabis, at least in the term of pharmaceutical sciences and in the realm of the science and medicine world and political world as well. That the roots of where that stigma comes from is that. And that when people say that cannabis is going to make you stupid and dumb, what they meant was colored and creative and non-productive and anti-establishment and counterculture.
Yeah, if you're non-productive, you're not helping the machine move and you're not helping the machine make money. What good are you?
And the thing about the color of it mattering is that it did. Because when we look at the other medicines and how they came into the realm and how they entered the realm of science, is that, well, actually, cannabis entered the realm in science very positively. Back in the 1800s, the scientists who discovered molecular cellular biology, which is cool, came back from a trip to India, I believe. Or no. He was talking to his friend who was a sailor, who's a trip from India, and he said, hey, this cannabis came in and I have a friend who's used it so extensively that I can be certain it's not going to cause a lot of harm. He wrote this down in Royal British Society. I love that. And it said it could be very useful for ailments of the stomach and the mind. Those are the two things
Still holds true.
And that was the entry point of cannabis into formal scientific literature. And it was researched in that realm for a very relatively short period of time. Before then, like a majority of the research that has been done on cannabis that has been funded by the war on drugs has been done on population-based studies to look at like the harms that it would potentially be doing. And it's interesting to just think about, like, when you put the amount of money that we have put towards studying how cannabis can be bad, if you take all of that money of all of that research and be like, how much money have we spent trying to look at how it could be good and how it could be miraculous? And then also, how much money have we spent on looking at how we could value the way that it is and we can improve the way that it is naturally, using the same pharmaceutical scientific principles. We could still improve the plant, I believe, in tons of ways. And we already are. We're seeing that innovation in the industry every day. Every day. We're seeing it happening. And it's beautiful. And I love it. And there's ways that we could harness this to then give back this real world information. And that's a beautiful thing that the pharmaceutical industry hasn't looked at because of the profitability margins of some of these other drugs. And the fact that these other drugs sometimes cause side effects, or often cause side effects that will then lead you to take other drugs, right? And the conversation over who is and isn't taking these drugs, who does and doesn't have access to the quality of life that you need to not take those drugs, who does and doesn't have the time in the day to think about their food and their cooking and take the time out of their day to spend on themselves, as you were saying, with like rolling up. This is a health equity issue. Absolutely. And this is something that is an access to medicine issue. Absolutely. Because a lot of people, when I started my Ph.D. and I realized that a lot of people in pharmaceutical sciences don't actually take pharmaceutical drugs, I was like, wow. Whoa. Wow. Okay. I was like, whoa.
Now we're getting to it.
And then in every journal club, we do this thing called journal club. Almost pretty much every PhD program will have a version of it where once a week, all the PhD students come together and we read a scientific paper. And actually, I want to read a piece of one today. Yes. But we read a scientific paper together, and then as the journal club, you're with professors, and one person will present the journal, and then everyone will have a discussion. Okay. What does this journal tell us? What are the caveats in the research? What haven't they considered? What have they considered? What is the future of this research? What would you like to see done that would bolster these results, or what would you like to see done that would maybe prove these results wrong? And it's a critical thinking course.
I love that.
It's very fun. And I did every journal club, you get to pick your paper, and I did every one of my papers on something that I thought was deeply related to my life and my trauma. And it was this experience that led you to be like more critical about how you talk about these things. And in the last 2 years of my PhD, when I was certain that I couldn't go into pharmaceuticals, but I was still going to finish the PhD because I already had done the hard part. I already had gone through my life crisis of being like, what am I doing? My job options are pharmaceuticals or academia. I cannot be in those systems. They don't like me there. Yeah. They don't respect me, or and they can, and I hope that they will eventually. But how I was feeling at the time was like, I cannot be oppressed like this for another second in this. I need to get out, I need to go be a musician. Figure some other stuff out for myself before I think about entering back into science, and how it felt for me to be there, and how it felt to me be tokenized and lauded in some ways, and then heavily oppressed in other ways. At these journal clubs, though, once I had decided that was my route, I started just speaking my mind. Yeah. Because what do I have to lose? I'm not going to be in academia. Right. And in every journal club, every time, and it got to be so old that I think that people started laughing and chuckling and kind of making fun of me, poking fun at me, of being like, well, we know what Miyabe's going to say. It's like, of course you know what I'm going to say. I'm going to say that it's about lifestyle and diet and access to preventative care. I'm going to say it's about natural medicines and how we used to live. Yep. I'm going to say it's about our evolution as humans and how we have socially evolved so rapidly, and that technology has evolved so rapidly, and it's incredible. It's a gift. It's amazing. And it also has come with this overstimulation. It's also come with this negative health effects. It's come with it's come with other late stage capitalism type stuff that we're experiencing socially that we cannot separate from the medicine. Yep. We can't separate out the fact that people are going through very different experiences right now. It is hard out there for some of us. It's hard, and it's not hard for everyone. Yeah. And that is something that has to do having these communications and realizing that, I watch a YouTube video, love the education on, I love the education just going on that you can hear a lot of different people's perspectives on things. And I really have been craving that. Yeah, for sure.
Let's talk about this study that we were reading before that you brought up. So there's a study that you found, or not found. I mean, it's out there. You guys can find it online.
Everyone can find it. It's actually publicly available. It's open access, which I love.
Because great. You don't have to pay for it.
A lot of science you have to pay for, which is bullshit.
So annoying. And nobody's going to pay for it. So they're only going to read the abstract. And then they're only going to have that little summary and not really know all the details of the study. And that is a true injustice because the really good stuff is behind that locked up form that you got to pay for. And then you get to the nitty gritty of that study and realize the research is trash.
Yeah. And it's the abstract, I think, is good enough for most people to wet their teeth.
Yeah.
But the other thing is the understanding that comes with being able to access scientific knowledge and then speak with the vocabulary that can be spoken with. So it actually is a barrier to, in my opinion, it's an intentional barrier of communication. It's an intentional gatekeeping of information from a specific group of people who don't have access, number one, through university, cannot afford, number two, to pay $40 per paper.
Yep.
And like, number three, we're not maybe educated in a way to even understand how it's written.
And may not have time to read 20 pages.
Yeah, exactly. So, but everyone, this one is open. And I think I'll send you the link so that you can send it. It comes from a journal called Children from Basel. It was published in March of last year. The effect of SSRI exposure in pregnancy and early respiratory and metabolic adaptation in infants born preterm. And what they actually found is that there is no, they did not find an effect on infants born preterm, which is positive. That's great. But what I think is really, really interesting is when you get into the introduction of all scientific papers. All scientific papers are organized the same way as well. And the introduction is the framing of why they did this research. So why was the research done? Like, why did we look at why SSRIs are, why it would affect preterm birth? The reason why is because the use of antidepressants, I'm just going to read straight from here.
Yeah, go for it.
The use of antidepressants in pregnancy has grown over the years to an estimated rate of 6 to 13% of pregnant women. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
And also, like, for me, that makes me hurt because it's like a lot of moms are hurting, and then there's a lot of people who are hurting that aren't taking them as well.
Yeah.
And like, there's a lot of like,
who intentionally stop because like, oh, I'm pregnant now, and they do need some sort of medication just to be mentally well and stable during their pregnancy and to enjoy it and be present.
It's necessary. And also we know that depression and anxiety and mental and just instability, volatility, like struggling mentally is stressful.
It's stressful.
It's tiring. It's exhausting. It zaps your energy to the point where like, of course, that's not good for you growing a child. Like, and so we do know that this is necessary and it does help a lot of people. And I'm not shaming any of that either. I don't believe in plants over pills. I think they're both
useful
helpful.
And everybody can find that balance. But I think that everybody needs to have the option
and understand everyone should have the right informed consent. I had a beautiful conversation with friends, Mackenzie and Stephanie, who are both like, we just had this explosive conversation about informed consent and what does that mean with medicine, and that, you know, as cannabis users, it's complicated because of how we've been brainwashed and shamed. So 16 to 13%, so 6 to 13% is a large amount of moms. And it says that these antidepressants are frequently chosen due to their perceived high effectiveness and relatively favorable safety profile.
Keywords there, perceived and relatively.
Perceived high effectiveness and relatively favorable safety profile. Because we have to be correct as scientists when we speak. And it is true in the science, and it's documented that the perceived positive effects, they're effective, but it's not for everyone. And there is a significant population of people that it might worsen or it might not work at all.
Right.
And that's a significant population of people. So it is a perceived effectiveness for SSRIs. And also SSRIs, the very first one to hit the market, it's only like 4 years older than me.
What?
So like and people just don't think or like know that, you know, or that's not like as common.
So this is still new medicine. Like we're still understanding like how it actually interacts with the human body.
They're millennials. elder millennials, but like I don't know what the what's going on here.
Millennials.
Like, what is going on with this? Like I do not know. And it is evolving fast, right?
Yeah. Like very quickly.
So this is just keeping in mind, like, this is what we know in the research. So like, and we call them selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, but they're not all that selective. And they do, one of the ways that we've shown they work is by increasing endocannabinoids. That's one of the ways that they, that some of them have been shown to work.
Interesting.
Or that one of the, it's one thing. How about this? It's one change that happens, because there's a lot of changes that will happen. Changes in cholesterol levels in your brain. Like there's a lot of changes that occur. And one of them is serotonin as well. So that's true. But to call them selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, I feel like they were so grandiose, and like those early scientists, they were like, sure, you know, and it might have been a branding thing. It could have been a marketing thing. I'm learning more about that as I've been in the
part of the business.
world.
It's part of the business of it all.
However, so the however of the after the perceived high effectiveness and relatively favorable safety profile, however, substantial placental passage and fetal exposure has been established, and their use in late pregnancy has been linked to adverse effects in the newborn. An increased risk of preterm birth has been described across studies. One systematic review and meta-analysis of 8 studies from North America and Northern Europe with a total of 1.2 million people compared the incidence of preterm delivery in women with depression with and without the use of SSRIs during pregnancy, with a control group of women with no depression and no drug use. The risk of preterm labor was significantly higher in women with depression who were treated with SSRIs compared to the control to women with depression without the treatment. Even after adjusting for various co-founders, and they say this about cannabis. Birth weight was significantly lower in exposed group. They say this about cannabis all the time. They say this about smoking, and they say this about smoking just in general. Anyways, then we're going to get into the conversation about what average and why average matters. But birth average is based on a white dude. Yep. Birth weight was, I'm very comfortably right now in the overweight class for my height. And like, I always have been, and I've been in the obese category. You're considered
obese?
I don't think I'm in the obese category right now.
You're considered overweight,
but I've actually been in the obese category.
You look very fit.
I've been on the. I also have been heavier in my life when I was younger, and it was different, like distribution. But when I was an athlete, I actually was on the borderline. Heavier, When I was playing water polo, I was on the borderline of the obese level, and I was like, probably less than I don't know. I probably was less than 15% body fat, but it was just based on weight, right?
And muscle weighs more than fat. So
I'm just dense. I'm a dense human, and but so that the whole thing with the average is that, and anyways,
we can. I mean, the average is not based on us.
So birth weight was significantly lower in this exposed group, and so we say this about cannabis all the time. And the rate of respiratory distress syndrome was higher.
That is alarming for me. From taking SSRIs, the rate of respiratory distress was higher. Syndrome was higher.
And then 5 out of the 8 studies included women who received them only during the first trimester, whereas some of the other studies had all trimester use. And then they found that women who received SSRIs during the 3rd trimester had a significantly higher risk of this preterm birth. So that's why this is why they're studying the preterm birth, because they want to know are the babies who are born preterm, are they extra vulnerable? That's what they're trying to figure out, right? And I mean, I do very much so believe that all science is done with the pursuit of good for our community. That's why I'm a scientist. That's why most people I know are scientists. They want to improve humanity,
right?
We want to help people. I mean, some people more than others are attached to what that help means and what the effect is of your research. But this research is important. So. In utero exposure to SSRIs has been associated with poor neonatal adaptation, thought to be related to either serotonin overstimulation or withdrawal phenomenon after birth.
Withdrawal after birth.
There's actually protocols that have been published about how you can, if you do identify that a newborn is experiencing withdrawal, there are protocols established in hospitals where they can wean them off.
Wow.
It's been published on. There's a couple different ways that it's been looked at.
And from taking just pharmaceutical medications. Wow.
And I just want to point out that this is something we do without question, right? This is something that, and it does make sense. I think that it does make sense to do, but that we will do this without question. Meanwhile, there's this other side of the coin where there's this other medicine that does not look like a pill. It doesn't look, we don't call it an endocannabinoid system balancer, an endocannabinoid system, regulator, anti-anxiety, antidepressant, anxiolytic, gastrointestinal, anti-inflammatory, chronic pain, anti-inflammatory, destimulation. We don't call it all those things, but we call it cannabis,
Yeah.
And then this is just, it kind of goes on and on and on. So I actually won't read all the statistics, because also it's I think that sometimes it's more about pointing out for me, and if people want to go read that study and read more studies, there are plenty more like that. It's all about pointing out to me, how do we intend to go into this research? Who do we consult when we do it?
Yeah.
And then how are we interpreting what the results are in the context of all of the knowledge? not just the knowledge that we deem as valid because it meets some arbitrary standard of clinical value. Like, yes, clinical studies absolutely have value,
yes,
but they're also done in clinical settings. And so there is a value here to another entire set of information that is those of us that are living this experience. And, you know, we want our study to go on forever. We want to find the funding and have the ability to have a multi-generational study. You know, we want to know and look at things that we've been looking at for obesity, for diabetes, for cardiovascular disorders. You know, we've been looking and mental health. We've been looking at these things year over year for a long time for a lot of these things. And we've never researched the group of people who use cannabis daily. And in general, if I want to just expand it into like a greater expansion of that, we've never looked at the population of people who will not be abstinent from drugs in our lives in a way that is positive, in some sort of correlation to try to improve what we are doing already. Yeah. If that makes sense. Instead of trying to get us to convert to something else. Like, it's like, yes, also there's that too. That could be an option and we should be knowledgeable about that and be able to do it. But there also are people that spend our lives healing and living and, you know, thriving in different ways of thriving. And all life has its challenges, but like, you know, that there's this alternative way that we could be applying resources to help study it as science. Yes. That then adds to it. And that is also additive to medicine. I don't think anyone looks at our medical system anywhere actually and is like, well, this is going well. Like, I think there's a problem and it's dangerous. And I think it's scary. And I think a lot of people are scared. Yeah. And this is scary for a lot of people. Cannabis is scary.
It's scary. I mean, there's that, you know, when you were talking about, you know, what do you tell your doctor when you get, you know, when you're a new patient and you're filling out the paperwork and they're asking you, okay, are you on any sort of medications or supplements? And there's that moment where most cannabis consumers think to themselves, should I tell this doctor? Can I trust this doctor and tell them that I am smoking weed? Like, will this be okay? Will this be a safe space? Or will they, you know, judge me, shame me, scold me, say I can't be their patient or worse, you know? Especially when you're talking about a pregnant patient, because now this person is also wondering, will they try to take my child away?
I think that we have to be really careful here. And if I wanted to say, like, if for a second, and I'm taking off like that scientist hat, like I'll put the scientist hat on first, actually.
Okay.
Because also I'm not a medical professional and nothing I say is ever medical advice. I'm just actually, scientists are philosophers. The PH is philosophy in Ph.D. And the philosophy hat coming on, you always need to be honest with your medical professionals. You always have to tell them what's going on with you because they can't help you if we're not being honest. Taking my scientist hat off, I don't disclose my use to my medical professionals. I already experience enough discrimination in the medical system for how I look and also for what it says on my charts. And that discrimination that I have going on there already indicates to them that I probably am a daily cannabis user, which would mean that they're already going to, they probably don't even have to ask. But even if they do ask, I will say no. And I have met a doctor who's going to begin to practice in June that I'm going to probably go see, who I will for the first time have a relationship with one of my medical professionals that is like completely open and isn't in some way guarded. Right. Doesn't have some like piece of it where I'm like withholding myself.
So there's not full trust there, you know?
And in terms of speaking to moms, to parents, in terms of speaking to people who have kids, like, this is a dangerous thing for the discrimination that is occurring. I have heard some stories and there's too many out there that I haven't heard. And this is something that is serious. So for me, with my personal hat and my non-scientist, like the safe, blah, 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 what's safe for you and your children is safe for you and your children. And that is like not something that I have any place in dictating or having an opinion on. And that fear that I would feel in that situation and that vulnerability of having child protective services and having your kids go through the experience of getting questioned.
It's trauma. It's unnecessary trauma for a whole family, but especially, you know, just think about, I've heard so many stories over the years, so I won't get into it because it is a bit of a downer of a subject, but you know, it's life and it's happening to people and it's happening as recent as this year and last year across the country. And it's a damn shame, you know, to just be quite frank and like, you know, speak on it. And I always tell people, you know, much like what you just said, it really depends. Sometimes you're going to walk into a hospital, a medical setting, and you are a red flag. Just being who you are, how you look, the type of insurance that you carry, those things are red flags.
Do you have insurance?
Do you have insurance? Red flag. You don't have it. Oh, you're paying cash. Red flag. Those kinds of things. Are you young? Red flag. All of these things. Is there a father present? Red flag.
Oh man, is there
some sort of dick in the room?
Is there a dick in the room? That's what I was gonna say.
Is there a dick in the room that's to speak for this little lady right here? Because I can't possibly know what's going on with my own fucking body. Anyways, it's a whole nother subject.
It is so hard that this is what is happening, and that this trauma and who is that affecting? And I think it's, in my opinion, it seems socioeconomic as a huge component of this, is that this access to medicine and with cannabis, and that we need to be aware of how it's happening. And I want to encourage all people who have that fear, that one thing that helped me with that fear a lot was getting a medical card. And I know that that's a barrier to entry for a lot of people. One thing that I would encourage you to do, and I don't know off the top of my head if any of the medical programs in the medical states offer this, but I think somewhere they probably should. Someone should. If not, please do correct me. But I would encourage you, if you can't afford to go see that doctor, to reach out to that doctor directly, or to reach out to there's groups now who do who provide these services online, and it's quite easy with telehealth. I would encourage anyone who cannot afford that $150 to $200, sometimes plus.
I think in Florida it's really expensive.
It's also about the time, which is hard. So I'm really excited to see the online telehealth things coming around, because that's more accessible to people. And I'm hoping to work with some of those, because our early data in this, so much of the data that we have found, this study has blown mine and Riley's minds, because so much of the data that we found is direct evidence that the medical programs in the medical states are not serving medical patients, because there's barriers to entry and access. And also because the adult consumer market is actually just prioritize. It's swallowing it whole. So that's an issue. Number two, that there's not enough benefits to medical patients for that to be worth it, for that time and that investment of money. Because if it was more worth it for people, then there would be more medical patients.
There would be more,
And one of the things that makes it not worth it, and one of the things that people don't understand, that I do think getting a medical card gives you legal protection. However, we don't have strong enough precedent for that legal protection. We need more. And it depends on what state you're living in, how much has been established in the local state courts and stuff. Cause I'm just now understanding law. I was always disgusted by politics, totally honestly.
The legal side of it is it's quite murky, and it's really interesting. And it varies state to state, because the states are handling it,
so messy in all these different states, and how and I'm sure there's it's I'm so averse from that. I'm I don't want anything to do with that.
And sometimes to make these things law and to get these things on your books, it takes you going to court and fighting them and getting a high court ruling to say hey, this is now going to be the new president, because precedent. Yeah. Oh God, let's not talk about that. Because that's how legal precedent gets established. That's how law is then done, is that laws get made and then we challenge them. And so for cannabis, I would encourage, though, I do think that having a medical card, I think, gives you stronger legal protection. I agree.
I do think that we are going to see way more. We are going to have to see way more of these legal ballot, battles really continue to happen. And that it is with a lot of my research and what I do believe that daily consumers are medical users. And Riley has said this before, that we don't choose when the plant is medicinal. It is always anti-inflammatory. It is always going to be an anxiolytic at those. It is always going to have effects that are medicinal on the body, because it itself is a medicine.
Right.
So we are using it with intention or not. It is medicine in our bodies. Whether you are drinking cough syrup to suppress your cough, or making lean, it's going to be that it's the purpose that it has on your body will be the same as it's a drug.
Right.
Drugs are drugs. These molecules that we choose to use any which way, there's an argument to be made that all of the drugs that are on the illegal market have a therapeutic benefit, or else they wouldn't be still being used, because there wouldn't be a reason for people to go back to them. And yes, addiction is a thing, and it's a bitch. Yeah. And I have that brain type. I've been diagnosed with a cannabis use disorder, and I do and have struggled with my use because of that. that. Or like my schedule, my dose schedule of what I do. But I wake up every morning and I drink coffee and I'm smoking. And that's been an everyday for a long time for me. And actually 64% of the people who took our survey consumed before noon.
Yeah.
And that was
wake and bake.
And that's a very important dose time. It's a therapeutically relevant dose schedule for the endocannabinoid system for how it cycles. And all of this is just to say, like, all of this is just to say that our way that we've been viewing it and going around it, and the way that for parents and for this, like, I think that this science can help bring us legal protection. Hopefully I want to, and I don't know if legal protection, like, that's not my realm, but the numbers are my realm, right? Like the evidence is the realm, and the description, the ability to describe the numbers in a way that is like, hey, this is how I'm interpreting this. And there are other interpretations of it as well. And I can't wait to like continue to see more data as it evolves and all those other interpretations. But we've found evidence that daily consumers of cannabis have a higher likelihood, or it's more likely for us to be multiply socially vulnerable. It's more likely for us to be queer and neurodivergent. It's more likely for us to struggle with access to healthcare, to have medical trauma, and to have PTSD. It's more likely to have chronic pain issues, which just makes sense.
It makes sense.
It's kind of like, duh. That's who we are. That's who we are. Like we have problems. We have problems is like, let me reverse that. We have different challenges. Our lives are different. Yeah. You cannot compare me to someone who is going to spend their entire lives not taking any drugs. We need to start understanding who we are and meeting ourselves in ways that then leads to other things. And maybe one day my life will be in a place where I'm not using any molecules, or I'm not benefiting from anything. Right. It's possible that one day in my life that would be a thing. I'm not going to like go for that as a goal, because right now my goal is just to continue building the stability that I have.
Right. And
maintaining it. Yeah. Maintaining stability in this current situation is like, it's taking all of my time and energy that I have. Like, So, it's taking all of this, and the people look at me and say, well, that's because you're using cannabis. That's why.
And that's what they want you to think is like, well, this is a crutch for you.
You're
obviously
the one that has this issue. You're the one. And I'm like, let me tell you what
it's
I'm
your
like.
addiction to weed. That's what
you don't want to see this outside of cannabis, or like, not that you don't, some people maybe would want to see it for a short amount of time, but it would be a quick burnout to like an unhealthy lifestyle and possible death, like likely death soon after. Like that is just my opinion. And like, it's just one opinion on like the experience that I've had, and so many other people who feel the same way. And I speak for like all the people who have shared their stories with me. Like I carry this like, and I don't want to say I carry a weight like a burden. Like I carry a weight like almost like that it's not like a carrying of weight actually. It's almost just like I know that there are people who are standing behind me who like the experiences that they've shared with me, and like the things that people have told me and the details that they've gone about how cannabis has healed them and has saved their lives. So many different ways of mental health, chronic pain, GI issues, and cancer, and family. And it's so much to not, it's too much to ignore.
It's too much to ignore.
I
feel the same. I get told, I mean, as you can imagine, and I also feel that weight, and it's quite heavy, and it's not in a bad way. I'm very happy to have that weight and to carry that, because I feel like I'm built for it, and I can, and I'm in a space because of this plant where I can handle that information and use it in ways that I feel can be impactful. But it's really important to know those stories, and for people to tell those stories, and for people to like thank God, you thank whatever universe, the heavens, the sun, the stars, that this plant is an option for folks, because like it's saving a lot of lives. It's saving relationships. It's saving people. It's saving humanity in a lot of regards, because a lot of people can be assholes, and they should be. If you're dealing with pain in your body every single day and you look fine, you have one of those invisible illnesses, and like people don't know that. And this is the only thing that keeps you waking up in the morning to take care of your kids, to drop them off to school, to go to your job and work 9 to 5 and do it again the next day, rinse and repeat. That this is the only thing that allows you to show up and be present in your life. How can someone say that that's not good for you, Because they don't value your life. Like, it's like, because they don't care how you feel or what your experience is of your day to day. It's hard for us to care about others. I think I really struggled with that when I was younger. Before I found cannabis, I struggled to have that connection with other people. And I think that is something that
it is very difficult to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And I do think that there are certain things that having that first experience of it changes your ability to understand, what it is. And there is a huge number of people out there. And, as we were talking about science and medicine and, that the overwhelming opinion of power that goes into how we interpret things is just one. Mm-hmm. And it's been the same one that has been going on globally for like a long time. Mm-hmm. And that we're in like a really interesting and exciting space. And like, to carry that and to be like, I'm built with it. Mm-hmm. I'm also privileged to be in a position where like, I take on this risk that like is a risk and is scary and is terrifying. And it's terrifying to me because it's been hard and it's been difficult. Yeah. And it's been difficult for me to stay true to myself
I feel that. I feel that. It's definitely, I feel that as well. And, doing what I do, I think about the safety of my kids all the time. Like I think about my safety and everyone who's in my life that I love and like people just hating me so much that they may want to do, and so I think
you get the messages though. You get the messages.
And that's what they say. Like,
they say that they think you should be dead. Like they say that. And
people say that.
Yeah. I mean, it's
real people say that.
Real people say it. Real people say a lot of things.
A lot of, very like racist shit to me. Very, of course, it's a Black woman who's doing this. Like, what does that mean?
Of course they said that too.
Yeah,
like,
of course. Like,
that's the difference between psychedelics and cannabis and why psychedelics are gaining so much more speed and have this rapid acceptance into the clinical setting. It's like, because psychedelics were introduced through to science as a white man's drug.
Yeah.
And as an enhancer of the mind, which it is. But the enhancement of the mind that cannabis was introduced through was like jazz.
Yeah.
And also like immigrant workers, like laborers, like people who think about them saying cannabis makes people unproductive, and yet jazz musicians are playing night sets while they're working day jobs. Meanwhile, no, I'm serious though. And migrant workers are in the fields daily, like their body. Like it just blows my mind the hypocrisy of that. And that and that this I feel like the weight of carrying it and what you said about that you can carry it, that makes me feel stronger. And I like that because I've been struggling with that. Like,
it's like, I feel like we're never given anything more than like we can carry. And if you are given that honor where you're one of those truth tellers, right? Like you're one of those people that people feel comfortable opening up to you. And I'm like, wow, what an honor, because you didn't have to tell me any of that. You know, most people are not going to tell.
I get to share that. Yeah. I get to have that experience that you just shared with me. That when people tell, like on 420, I had a couple conversations. One was with my Uber driver and he dropped me off and when he dropped me off, he was like, I never have conversations like this, like ever. And I was like, that's crazy. Thank you for sharing like your experience of like your how you moved like from all the countries. You were not born in your country your parents are from, then you moved to the East Coast and then now you're out here in California, like sharing these experiences of how all these differences in lives and how we're similar and how we're different. Like, like that gift to me has changed my scientific perspective. It's changed everything in my world. It's also just changed my life in being able to understand myself and like, and the role that all of us have or can have. And as a scientist, there's Dr. Carl Hart has a quote that he is someone I look up to, like his quote that said that it's the job, and I might be kind of misinterpreting it, the gist of the quote is that it is the responsibility of scientists to correct the blunders of like politicians. Ooh.
Yes.
And that political advocacy, while I said I was disgusted with it, I like both Dr. Riley Kirk and I are very involved in our local politics and that we feel very strongly that even if we're speaking to deaf ears and even if we're making ourselves more visible and more vulnerable in our local communities, which is something we all, that's what you're struggling, that's the responsibility. Yeah. That's the fear of being like, we are doing things that at this point are at some point adding risk. And to be able to do that though, and go to these politicians and go to the people who lead my city, who do want good things and are just uninformed. Yep. And are just not able to get it. And the way that we are changing these things is by conversations and conversations and conversations. And like, I honestly can't believe that I even talked about all of this because I was so scared. I told you I don't have plans on being a mother and I'm not a mom. I have plenty of friends who are moms and a lot of matriarchal figures. Like, and so I understand that though. I understand the change I understand that being a mom is something that changes your life. I understand that sharing your body. I understand that I understand that caregiving and responsibility, and that I've been a state residential caregiver, and I think that's probably the closest that I've come to that. I was a residential caregiver for an adult about my age, and that's probably the closest I've come to feeling the weight of that responsibility for someone else's health and safety and happiness. And it changed it was a huge thing that honestly I am not like. I should not like, and that's something that I've never felt like I wanted to give an opinion for moms on anything, just because I don't want to disrespect I don't want to disrespect what my opinion would be because it's uninformed or it's without.
I know, because so many women often will be like, well, you're not a mom, so you can't really. And it's just like, why are you gonna like, now we're not having a conversation because you're being dismissive. And I think that being dismissive is not the way to have these kinds of conversations, because everyone has value and different perspectives and you know, educational standpoints that they're coming from, and they can add value, and it calls you to at least go, I didn't think about it that way, you know? And so there's value in everything that you have to say and everything that you've said on this podcast episode today. I just want to like get this one last question in, because I know this is like a big one, not just for parents and moms, but also just for cannabis consumers overall who are interested in the cleanest and like safest ways to ingest weed but smoke it overall. Like, what are the cleanest ways? I always say use a dryer vaporizer, but I know that's not accessible to everybody. It's
unfortunate. And I actually, one of our sponsors of our nap time bioactive episodes for our nonprofits podcast with Dr. Riley Craig, that they're more accessible of it, but they still, no matter what, it's hard for me to, let me just back up with the dryer vaporization and go into the most safest thing. All right. Pharmaceutically, the golden ticket for pharmaceutical drugs that we aim for is the pill, like what is called oral administration.
Okay.
And that's what edibles are.
Yeah.
And that's what I think, like, there's some like tinctures and stuff I think for me are mostly edible, but sometimes they absorb in the mouth a little bit. But I think for the most part, but that if you were looking for something that would be like what we would say is the most similar to the pharmaceutical standard for safety of like dosing, because you're not going to be like combusting things and you're not going to like, then that would be it. It would be edibles.
Okay.
They're dosable, they're discreet, they have a long duration of action. Those are huge benefits.
Yeah.
That being said, not everyone enjoys or like benefits from edibles. Not everyone has the right effects profiles from edibles. Not everyone has the right GI system or enzymes, or we don't even know. Some people just don't feel them. Like that's, we got to figure it out. Like,
I don't know.
Big edible studies coming soon. Any edibles people come work with, like, no, seriously.
Let's figure this out.
Let's figure it out. Formulations people, edibles people, hit me up. Like, I think that we could figure it out.
Yeah.
Also. But like, so let's go to the inhalables now. I'm going to start with the ones that I don't like and I'll work up.
Okay.
Not that I don't like, I don't prefer dry herb vaporization.
Really?
It is very clean. I will do, oh my God. Okay. How about this? I have enjoyed doing it very, very much in my life.
Okay.
I've enjoyed it around circles of friends with the Vogue. I've enjoyed it with the little pipe one where it was like a little pipe and like it looked like a lava lamp or something. You like shoved it in. I have enjoyed dry herb vaporization tons and
the volcano
tons.
Is nice. It's like
tons and tons and tons. The flavor, the complexity of the flavor,
amazing,
and it's not smoke. There'll be like a little bit of cloud going on, but it's not that. It's vapor, and it's super clean. And honestly, yes, like in terms of like my lung health, like and the way that I can monitor my lung and my, I'm a singer, I'm a musician, and I definitely consider myself more an artist than a scientist, but I also think science is just a medium of art. So, or that it could be. And I can note it by the way that my voice sounds and the way that my throat and my lungs feel, how long I can hold a note. Like I judge that by like, I guess that. So I know that dry herb vaporization does feel better on my lungs.
Okay.
100%.
Okay.
100%. Like,
okay.
And I definitely enjoy it. And in terms of like the science of what we know about both pyrolysis, which is without oxygen, and combustion with oxygen, we do know that that's like the cleaner, that's the least amount of types of molecules you're going to be taking in.
Okay.
All right. My brain like seems to really benefit from like more molecules. It seems to benefit from like a buffering effect of more things. So within the dryer vaporization, I will say that like there's like these really cool manual ones, the Dynavaps. They're actually the ones that I was mentioning, the sponsors. They have the lowest price point that I've seen for getting into it. I think it's like $40 or $50.
Wow.
And it's manual.
Please send me the link to that so I can share that.
So it's manual and it's best heated with a butane lighter.
Okay.
Because that's the cleanest, but you can, I've done it with a candle, I've done it with a, so I like that it's accessible and that it's manual. You can pre-pack it and go. My thing about them is that the bowl side, that part is that the bowl size is kind of small.
Okay.
I've used concentrate out of it though. I've put concentrate in there with it too. And I've like taken like, I mean, I think it might be a little wasteful for the concentrate because I can't tell when it's starting to come off, but like, anyways, like, so, but that's one option. Then there's the standard, like there's the volcano. Everyone knows which one that looks like. And then there's like some other ones, but there's another type that's coming out that's like gaining popularity that one of my friends actually told me was actually, it's like a rehash of like a technology that used to exist back in the 80s that was going around Northern California, at least like, and it's called the ball vaporizer. And it's basically like you have this heating unit. It has a bunch of tiny balls in it. And then you pass the air through that and you hook it up to like a bong or like you hook it up to a rig. And basically the flower is underneath here and you're breathing in and the little balls provide a surface area. So you heat the air rapidly and then you take it in. And it tastes in between the Vulcan smoking. The taste is in between. I got wrecked. I was
really
ripped. I mean, it was... I also didn't know what I was doing. So I put in like a quarter gram and I was like, that's cool. That'll be cool. And it just kept going and going. And I'm just going and going and going, you know, and I was like, and I was just absolutely wrecked. So that is a cool technology. And I very much so enjoy the vaporizers. Yeah. But I prefer dabbing over them.
Same.
So the next thing up is dabbing. I like cold starting and I like torch glass with a big surface area of oxygen. But I think the electronic rigs are sick too. They're also them. Like, I mean, they're also just key for us.
They're so convenient.
Going out to doing stuff and then on your day to day and like, and so those like, and I think that with those, they actually hurt my lungs the most.
Really?
Like my throat and my lungs. It depends on the size of the
does it mean, is it because you can maybe make bigger hits when you're actually dabbing?
I think it's particulate size, terpene polymerization, oxidation. And I think it depends. There's so much chemistry that we're really excitingly learning. Like I went to an atmospheric science talk just last week and it was an atmospheric scientist that researched terpenes for global warming. And he was researching terpenes for cloud formation and stuff. All of his findings were applicable to dabbing. And to vape carts because we have high percentage terpenes in there and we're increasing their temperature and then we rapidly cool them to room temperature and then they have particulates and then they go like so then we know we know stuff about it. We also don't know a lot of stuff about it. So that would be my guess is that it has to do with particle size. It has to do with terpene. Like terpenes are pretty corrosive. Like so it has to do with like those things. And then that's like the dabbing and the vape pen like section of that situation. Okay. And in that scenario, you are definitely applying heat and oxygen and degradation. Like you're definitely applying stuff. There's definitely stuff happening. It's a chemical reaction.
Unless you're using an e-rig, unless you're using like a Puffco or something.
But they still heat. They still heat. They have to volatilize somehow.
That's true.
There's some way that and it's like the temperatures that these things start happening at are, we don't even know. It could be incredibly low. So, I mean, and it likely is very low. So like different reactions will happen with different temperatures, different time, different oxygen exposure, like all that kind of stuff. It's like, so that's like the next way up. And then there's like then there's just flour, right? Or flour or hash or, infused pre-rolls and like, and I love flour. Yeah. And I also have to give the full disclosure of like, I feel like I'm always trying to be a scientist that does disclose my bias because I've been told over and over again that my bias is what will make me not a good scientist.
Well, I guess.
So I just have to disclose it. I feel compelled to disclose it. And I feel compelled to disclose. Yeah. Cannabis saved my life. And the entry of cannabis to me in California med market, a no adult use with flower specifically saved my life. My access to flower saved my life. Like my access to my medicine that was working for me, like is the thing that allowed me to then pursue my career as a scientist and study it and then get to the point now where I feel like I have way more understanding about it. And so I have a strong personal relationship with this plant. It is more than just my medicine. It is a living contributing piece of my life and my community. It's the thing that ties me the tightest to other people in community. It's my way of life. It is something that I feel very mystical and spiritual and divine around. And so I have a bias about the flower because it comes from this point of like, and the first time, last year was the first time I grew the plant. So I researched cannabis for over 13 years. And then I grew the plant for the first time, and the farm, we went big, they got huge. But that first leaf that I saw, the first true 5 leaf, you know, I cried. Like I cried, like it, like, so the way that I feel about cannabis and the way that I feel about it is also just like, it comes from that place. And so that is also definitely should be taken into consideration when I say that, like, I will never not appreciate flower as the thing that I think is my number one thing. And I will never not like gravitate towards that. And maybe something changes in my health down the line where I have to.
Right.
And I'm going to mourn that day.
Yeah.
And, you know.
Yeah, same.
And that's just, you know, that's just where I'm at with it right now. And it might happen that point comes in the future and I say, I've lived. Like, I'm, you know, I don't know how I'll feel when that happens. It also could be tomorrow. We never know what
I try not to think about it.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
And then it's not worth it for me to think about it.
Yeah.
What's worth it for me to think about is that like there's a net benefit in life and we all get to choose that.
Yeah.
And that I do really like mixing my modes.
Yeah. Like, I love that you broke it down like that. And I want to just caveat too, for folks who do decide to opt for flower. I mean, it's, you know, combustion. Yeah. It's not the best, but you can always use hemp wick. There are really great products in the market, like the mouthpiece filter that you can put on your bong or your pieces, so that you can kind of filter out a lot of things. So there are ways to still consume that method safely. And let's be real, like the quickest onset you're going to get is from inhaling the whole flower. Nothing else is going to hit you faster. So if you're in middle of a, you know, emergency moment, if you are having an anxiety attack, if you are in extreme pain and you need to feel good right away, like inhaling is going to be your best bet. Anytime. And, you know, I always believe in layering. You inhale, you to eat an edible, so the edible kicks in after the actual inhalation high wears off, and now you're covered for however many hours, and you can go about your day.
That's a cool dose schedule.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense, because then you're basically, when you're going down off the inhalation kinetics, you're coming up. And you can kind of marry them together.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
And it layers.
I'm so glad you brought up that benefit.
Yeah.
That's absolutely another one of the benefits for me, is that throughout the day, I know when I need to dose. It's not always the same time every day, because you have different needs throughout different days. You have different demands on you, and you have different environments that you find yourself in that can cause for different levels of inflammation.
Exactly.
So I'm really happy you brought that up, because that's another benefit to me of inhaling. And then I know that the more you get high up on the inhalation scale, and the more you get high up on your consumption scale in terms of how much and how often you consume, that's when the discrimination will also begin to to aggressively and exponentially ramp.
It's true.
And that's something that I think I'm really happy to start talking about, and it's scary to start talking about it. I'm glad I don't feel that anxious now, but like, I'm sure I'll have an anxiety thing after this at some point before it goes out.
I know this has been great.
I know, but it's like, I know that I don't, and I'm not trying to speak for other scientists or anyone else. I hope that they know that. Like, I hope that the people who really do not like my opinion know that, like, I'm not talking to you. Yeah. I don't know. That came out weird. Wait, hold on. I just meant like that. I'm not talking for you. Yeah. I'm not speaking on the opinion or on the behalf of anyone else except for myself and like the community and my opinion of, like, you know, of that. And I think that's where all my anxiety comes from, is that, or not all of it, but a lot of my anxiety around this topic comes from the fact that this is a very scary thing. And that you don't want to harm anyone. You don't ever want to do harm. That's not the intent of sharing knowledge. Yeah. But that the knowledge should be shared and should be contextualized. And then we should be allowed to have it, though, and make some decisions for ourselves about it.
Absolutely. Okay. This has been such a dope conversation. What's the best way for people to reach you, or, you know, if they have any questions, what's happening next with you?
well, I really want to do a study. I mean, I think there's something.
I really want to do a study. It's been in the back of my head for years, and so
yes, and so if the best way to stay in touch with like the research and what we're doing on that side is to go to appliedpharmacognosy.org, and I'll send you the link so that you can link
I'll put it in the show notes.
And also just because the pharmacognosy is actually the ancestor of pharmaceutical sciences. Pharmacognosy, cogno is like from cognition. It means like to understand or to think. And then pharma, the original root of that was like medicine, potion.
Wow.
Like the root of that. And yes, it's drug, but I mean, the root of pharma has multiple meanings. Mm-hmm. So this was the understanding of medicine is pharmacognosy. And it's applied to non-purified natural products. Usually it's, and that's cannabis. Like, I mean, it's a lot of medicines actually. And so it's a hard one. It's a hard one to spell. So I'll say it like, but please sign up for our email list because we are all very censored. Can I say that word on here? Can I say censored? We're censored.
Yeah, you sure can.
We are heavily prevented from communicating like these types of knowledge, like this type of knowledge and sharing this type of thing. So getting emails really helps because we can like directly have communication and we don't actually have to think about whether us saying a certain scientific word is going to make our video get flagged, our accounts get deleted. It's so that is definitely the best way to reach out. And there's also a sign up form for volunteers there. And we're just now establishing and organizing around how we're going to do this. We want to act together in synergy. We want to activate every different group to do their own study or to take part. How about this? Like, we need every community to have a say in the study that has to do with their community.
Yes.
Right? Like there has to be some form of back and forth.
Absolutely.
Between the creation of that study and what questions the people who are experiencing it think are the most important. Because what the community wants to know is equally as important. So we'd love volunteers who are involved or who would like to get more involved in something like that process, or volunteers who would like to get involved in grant writing, because we need to also start establishing that we belong in the grant funding research realm, that we are a population of discriminate. We're a minority. We're a pretty big minority, actually, that spans socioeconomic and different ethnicity classes. So we don't all look the same, but we're a big population minority of people that are getting discriminated against. And that's part of what's happening in the industry with all of the like politics. It's like all the green tax that everyone around the nation experiences all the time. Like, I think that we're really excited to take volunteers and then we want everyone who wants to be a part of this to be a part of it. Yeah. And we're getting some really good feedback and we're getting some really good, and it helps us with support as well. Like, it helps support that people hear the things that we say and tell us that, because it is honestly, like, if I just have a moment, like, it's hard to be back in the sciences. I'm having a hard time with it. Like,
oh, well, you should be there. Like 100,000%. Like, I
don't know. I'm like thinking about going back to the kitchen. Like, I mean, I like restaurant industry stuff a lot. I like food. I like culinary stuff. Like, I know I'm 100% that this is what I have to do. I'm compelled to it. Like, but at the same time, I'm like, damn, like
that internal war.
Yeah, because the community and speaking for us, as it's always the responsibility of the marginalized population to speak up, and that feels hard. Like, it feels hard.
Not only are we living the experience, but in real time, we also have to kind of fight for others and ourselves, and it's like so exhausting continuously. Which is why we need this plant, because if we did not have this plant, then we would be killing. Like, we would literally be like, the world would be in total and complete turmoil, because we have to keep our shit together or we end up in prison. So
oh my god, it's far too
how can people reach you? Like, what's your Instagram handle?
My Instagram is Miyabe Ph.D, all one word. So MIYAB as in boy, E, and then PhD, just all one word. And I'm so happy to have been here. Thank you so much. I didn't know how I would feel having this conversation. And I just want to say that, like, I appreciate, like, the things that I appreciate community education so much. Like, I appreciate the time and effort. And like, I know how much it is. And I know what you must get, like, for it. Yeah. And I know what must be part of this, you know, this whole journey, but like who you speak for and like that I see that and it's so admirable. And I'm so happy that we got to like chill and like talk about it because it's not easy and like
it is not,
but it's appreciated and it's so we need so much more of it. And I want to keep encouraging other people to come out about smoking if they feel comfortable because like come join us, like let's
join our crusade.
You don't have to, it's no obligation, it's always your own safety, it's always your own decision, but also let's have a revolution.
For sure. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for joining. Like I definitely have to have you back. There's some other things we didn't even get to touch on that like I would absolutely love to like have this conversation, you know, another time and talk more about, you know, you mentioned how you have the dopest mom ever and like I would love to talk about
Saved my life.
Yeah,
bought
like,
my first piece. Like
I was like, well, your mom's awesome. So we have to talk about that. There's some other I'm sure after this episode airs, my audience will probably have like a million questions for
that'd be cool.
And we can do like a Q&A episode or something like that.
I love that. And we're going to analyze the data on, we're going to have our data. So we'll have some more information from our data set on cannabis use in moms.
Let's do it. Like, okay, so this is just part one. You'll definitely be back. We're going to do this again. Thank you guys so much for joining this episode of the Blunt Blowin Mama podcast. Thank you so much, Miyabe. Yay!
Nailed it.
I got it. Okay. Thank you so much for joining. And you guys, if you ever need more support on questions of pregnancy or breastfeeding or even like sex and cannabis, I got you. I have a workshop for that. Go to bluntblowinmama.com/workshops. And I have some informative things for you to watch there and learn a little bit more from a lot of my favorite experts in the field and also speaking from my own experiences as well. If you love this episode, then you know what you need to do. You need to rate it. You need to leave a review. You need to share it with a friend. You need to listen to it again. And, you know, all the support is always most appreciated. Thank you guys so much for listening and have a great day, evening, morning, whatever it is where you're listening. Bye.